Hello and welcome to the Black Cat Bushcraft channel. I was out in my camp area this afternoon just tinkering around, and I started playing with a spring pole snare. This is something that I've always seen in different survival books, in the military survival manuals and things like that, but it's something I've never really tinkered with. I'm familiar with the concept, but I've never actually put it into practice. So I thought today would be a good day to come up with my own version of the spring pole snare and test it out. I wanted my system to be very simple and utilize minimal resources and be something that I could reproduce in number very quickly without having to invest a lot of time, energy, and effort. And what I've come up with is a very simple version of the spring pole snare. Basically, you have to carve 2 number 7 notches, which is very simple, tie an overhand loop, and 3 Canadian jam knots, which are all very, very simple knots. So this is something that you could easily reproduce in number. And I think that would be the key to making something like this be successful in a survival scenario, is being able to put multiples of this trap out, and that way it would increase your odds greatly of actually catching an animal. So stick with me and I'll go through step by step how to set up this spring pole snare the way I've done this afternoon. All right, it's very simple to set up a spring pole snare. Basically, you'll need about 3 foot of cordage. In my case, I'm using number 36 bank line. That's what I always carry in my pack. I feel like it's the best cordage for the woods, bar none. So in a survival scenario, if I have my pack, that's what I'm gonna be carrying, and I feel like that would be the best choice. As far as knot tying goes, you need to know how to tie an overhand loop and a Canadian jam knot. 1, 2, 3 of these are Canadian jams, and that's simply an overhand loop, which I'll show you in just a moment. As far as carving goes, you'll need to carve your trigger stick and your ground stake. If you know how to carve a tent peg, that's basically the same thing as your ground stake. It's just a number 7 notch here with somewhat of a point to drive into the ground. And then your trigger stick is basically the same thing. You're just creating a number 7 notch, and those two will mate together. And you can fine tune those just depending on the shape of the sticks that you're using. It's just a matter of getting the angles to all meet together. You don't want them to lock up too tight, because then that will make it the trap a little less sensitive. So I have these kind of fine tuned, kind of rounded off some of the edges here, just to again tune up the trap and make it a little faster, a little easier to set off. As far as this here, these are just some little V notches for my cordage to lay in and just keep it from slipping off the trigger stick. But that's it. It's a very simple trap. Number 7 notch, V notch, overhand knot, and a Canadian jam. I'll show you how to tie the Canadian jam just in case you're not sure. All right, to tie a Canadian jam knot, you simply tie an overhand knot, which gives you a stop knot or stopper knot. You take that same stretch of cordage and you come back over itself, just like this, and you tie another knot like this. Right, and now when you cinch that down, that creates a slip knot. And if you work this down, this knot will bind up against this, and now it makes a very secure attachment. So if I want to connect my trigger stick with this, I can cinch down, or if I want to put that on my spring pole, that gives me a quick attachment, and it also makes it very quick to detach with no problem. All right, to tie my actual snare loop, I simply take a bite in the cordage just like this, and now I tie an overhand knot. Now I want to make that loop pretty small. Smaller is better. It will create a little more friction with the snare. So you can see what I got there. It's a very small loop. Now I'm just going to take the opposite end of this piece of cordage and run it through that loop. Just like that. And now I have a slip, which will become my snare. I'll just trim this tag end off a little bit. Here's a closer look at that snare loop, and it makes a very nice slip knot to make the actual snare itself. All right, to put all this together, I have my piece of cordage with a Canadian jam knot on each end. I'm simply going to connect my first piece of cordage that goes to my trigger stick, and now this one will go to my spring pole. Let's get that set up. All right, so this is the tip of my spring pole here, my sapling. I'm simply going to take the other Canadian jam loop here over top of the spring pole here, and now cinch that down. Now my trigger stick is connected to the sapling. All right, so the last step is now to connect my actual snare loop itself to my trigger stick. And with the Canadian jam, that makes that a very simple process as well. So now this goes up to my spring pole, and then this is my snare loop here, which I'll set up on the ground. All right, so at this point, I've got my snare loop opened up. I'm just gonna bring my trigger stick down to my ground stake. I'm gonna roughly lay my snare in place about where I want it to be. Now, I'm gonna be very careful keeping my face out of the way, just in case that thing should slip. And that's it. Alright, so if I was actually trying to catch an animal in a survival scenario with this trap, I would have barricade material around and help funnel that animal into the snare. Let's say all that's done and this stick is the animal. He comes walking through and he gets his head right into the center of that loop. Once he pulls, you can see the trap triggers. You can see that my trap is now up here in the top of this tree, and hopefully that would be the animal being choked and suspended off the ground. And that does a really good job, actually. I did want to throw out a couple of quick disclaimers in regards to this video. To the best of my knowledge, in almost all 50 states, if not all 50 states, primitive trapping methods are illegal. So this would not be a legal way to trap game. However, this is a survival tactic. So if we were in a survival scenario, then we have to do what we have to do in order to collect calories to survive. So I just want to throw that out. This is not something you would put into practice on a regular basis, but rather something you would have as a last resort in a survival scenario. Number two, this is theoretical in that I've never caught an animal utilizing this trap. Today's my first day actually really toying around with it. So whether it really works, I cannot say. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't work. I believe that it would work. I don't see any fault in it, but just throw that out there. This is theoretical in that I have not actually trapped an animal using this method. All right, I'd like to thank you guys for taking the time to tune in for this quick look at this simple spring pole snare. Again, it's not something that we're going to use all the time, but we always have room for one more tool in the toolbox, and this is one more piece of knowledge that we can carry with us just in case we should ever need it. Thanks again for your interest and your support, and I look forward to talking to you with another video again as soon as possible. And until that one, take care and God bless.